They say a mother knows. But I didn't. Or maybe I didn't want to. I've run that thought over and over in my head, peeling back years of moments, laughter, glances exchanged that I thought were innocent. My name is Martha Elridge, I'm 66 years old, and this is the story of how my son's wife, the sweet girl I welcomed into our family with open arms, was never truly his. She belonged to someone else. Someone I loved more than life itself, my own daughter, Eliza. It began one October evening, a normal dinner at our home in the Vermont countryside. The kind of evening where the windows fogged up from the oven's warmth, where roasted garlic and red wine filled the kitchen, and where my son Nathan joked about overcooked lamb while Rachel, his wife, pressed her hand gently against Eliza's back to pass her a dish. I thought nothing of it. But my gut did. It tensed, like a dog growling at a shadow I couldn't see. Eliza giggled, cheeks flushed not from wine, but from that look. That long, too long look between them. I blinked it away. My husband passed 4 years ago, and I've learned to live with silence. But this wasn't silence. It was tension. Undercurrents I couldn't name yet. And then, weeks later, I found the first note. A small, folded paper tucked inside a recipe book Rachel borrowed from the kitchen shelf. I still remember the snow between our fingers. Your laugh. That night on the roof. The handwriting wasn't Nathan's. It wasn't even meant for him. I recognized it instantly, it was Eliza's. I told myself it must be old, from college, from a friend. But the date was just a month ago. That's when the first crack formed. And when I tried to ask Eliza about it casually, she flushed and changed the subject, avoiding my eyes in that way only daughters can. Rachel didn't act strange, she acted perfect. Too perfect. But perfection is the first mask to slip. That weekend, I did something I'm not proud of. I checked the home security camera we'd installed last year, mainly to watch for foxes near the chicken coop. I never thought I'd be watching my own family. But what I saw still shreds me. A rainy Sunday afternoon. Everyone had left for errands, everyone but Eliza and Rachel. I watched them walk out back to the garden shed. And 25 minutes later, they emerged, hair tousled, lips swollen, avoiding the camera like they knew exactly where it pointed. That's when it all came crashing in. My daughter-in-law, the girl who cried on my shoulder the night before her wedding, wasn't crying for nerves. She was mourning a choice. And Eliza, my daughter, my baby girl, had been part of it. I didn't speak. I didn't scream. I watched my son come home later that night and kiss Rachel on the lips, while she looked at him with practiced love. Not real love. It was a performance. And I, Martha, the doting mother, had been watching a stage play for years. I wasn't just betrayed. I was made a fool. And what hurt the most wasn't the secrecy. It was the fact that I couldn't even decide who I was more angry with. Rachel, for marrying a man she didn't love? Or Eliza, for allowing it to go on? But this story, it doesn't end in heartbreak. It begins there. Because what they didn't know is that I would dig deeper. I would find every whisper, every meeting, every lie, and I would expose them when it hurt most. But first, I had to let the mask stay on. Just a little longer. For the right moment. Because nothing hurts more than betrayal, except being betrayed by the people you brought into this world with love. If this story already breaks your heart and stirs your curiosity, please like, share, and subscribe my channel. It helps more people hear stories like this. And tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone so much, only to find out they loved someone else the whole time? I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I laid there in the same bed where Nathan took his first steps, where Eliza once crawled in crying over scraped knees, where our old Labrador used to curl up at my feet. Now that bed felt cold, haunted, like even the furniture knew. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw Rachel's fingers brushing Eliza's hair back, saw the camera footage in grainy, painful detail, shadows and lips, a closeness that should have belonged to someone else. I had no right to spy. But they had no right to destroy my family. I needed proof. Real proof. Something more than glimpses and guesses. So the next morning, while everyone was still asleep, I walked out to the garden shed. My heart was pounding like I was a teenager sneaking into trouble. The inside smelled like soil and rosemary, the scent of tools and forgotten summers. But there, behind the tool rack, I found something I didn't expect. A small, pale pink blanket rolled up behind the crates. Still warm. Tucked inside was a lighter, a torn envelope with Eliza's handwriting, and a used tea mug. I turned it over and saw lipstick, Rachel's shade, the same one she wore every Sunday. I clutched the blanket and sat down hard on the dusty bench. Why here? Why this place? Of all the places in the world, why did they pick the one I had built with their father before he died? My stomach twisted with anger. But a strange ache swelled behind it too, like I'd stepped into a moment I wasn't supposed to see. Not just cheating. It was intimacy. That's what made this betrayal unbearable. They didn't just use each other. They loved each other. At least, I thought they did. But love built on lies is never love for long. That night at dinner, I watched everything differently. Eliza's eyes flickered toward Rachel when she laughed. Rachel laughed a little too hard when Eliza spoke. Nathan was clueless, bless him, passing the peas and praising Rachel's mashed potatoes. I wanted to scream. But instead, I smiled. Because something had shifted inside me. I wasn't just the mother anymore. I was the observer. The keeper of a terrible truth. I asked Rachel, gently, how work was going. She said fine. I turned to Eliza and asked if she was still dating that boy from the library, Ryan, wasn't it? She froze for a half-second too long, then nodded too quickly. We're taking it slow, she said. Rachel gripped her wine glass like her fingers needed something to break. The mask was cracking. And I wasn't done yet. After dinner, I sat on the porch alone. The night was cool, the stars blinking like secrets. And then Eliza came out. She didn't sit beside me, she stood at the railing, quiet, distant. Mom, she said. Can I ask you something? I nodded. Do you ever think some people aren't meant to choose what makes sense? Her voice was soft. You mean choosing someone you're not supposed to love? I asked. She froze. I saw it. That flicker of fear. And maybe guilt. Yeah, she whispered. Something like that. I sipped my tea. We all make choices, Eliza. But some choices break more than hearts. They break trust. And once that's gone, what's left? She didn't respond. Just stood there, staring at the stars. That was when I knew. She wasn't going to confess. Not yet. But her soul was crumbling under the weight of the lie. And I'd be the one to make sure it collapsed, right when it mattered most. Because they thought I was old, tired, too gentle to see. They forgot I was also a mother. And mothers? We always see, eventually. I never thought I'd become the kind of woman who installs hidden cameras in her own home. But then again, I never thought I'd live to see my daughter betray her brother, or my son sleep beside a woman whose heart belonged to someone else. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for truth. I needed to see what they did when they thought no one was watching. Not to destroy them, but to understand how long they'd been living this lie under my roof. So I called an old friend, Anita from the women's circle. Her grandson was a tech whiz, and when I asked discreetly, he came over the next morning with a pin-sized lens hidden in what looked like a decorative button. I stitched it into the corner of the lace curtain above the kitchen sink. Another I placed inside the hollow of an old flower vase in the hallway. The house watched them now. I didn't feel guilty. I felt hurt, yes. Sick. But not guilty. And a mother must know when she's been made a fool. I didn't wait long. 2 nights later, with Nathan working a late shift at the clinic, the footage revealed what I had feared and suspected all along. It was small at first. Innocent, if you didn't know what you were looking at. Rachel brushing past Eliza in the hallway, touching her lower back longer than necessary. Eliza lingering at the sink after dinner, waiting for Rachel to dry the dishes. They spoke in hushed tones. Smiled the kind of smile you only give to someone who's held your secrets under moonlight. But it was in the living room where my heart finally shattered. I watched Eliza lean against the arm of the sofa, hair down, eyes glowing in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager in love. Rachel sat close, too close, and though they didn't kiss, not there, not yet, it was the way Rachel touched Eliza's knee, her thumb circling softly through the fabric of her jeans, that told me everything. The intimacy. The trust. The yearning. I shut the laptop. My hands were shaking. This wasn't an affair, it was an attachment. A deep, dangerous bond. And neither of them had the strength, or the will, to end it. What tore me most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that Rachel never truly loved my son. She loved my daughter. She had walked down the aisle, recited vows, smiled for photographs, all for a man she never wanted. And Eliza, how could she? How could she let her brother be deceived like this? That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wedding photo of Nathan and Rachel. They looked so happy. But now, I saw the tension in Rachel's shoulders. I saw Eliza in the background of that picture, too, standing off to the side, hands clasped, a secret written across her face that no one noticed. Except now, me. I thought about confronting them, both of them. But something in my gut said to wait. Let it unfold. Let the lie grow large enough to suffocate itself. So I began to track their routines. Rachel's grocery runs. Eliza's early morning walks. The quiet nights when they both stayed behind while Nathan was away. I became invisible in my own home, a ghost floating through doorways, listening, remembering, observing. I was preparing. Preparing not for war, but for revelation. For the moment when the truth would burst into light, and none of them could hide behind pretty words or practiced smiles. Because something was building. Something heavier than guilt. Something dangerous. And I had to be ready, for whatever came next. I've always believed that the worst truths aren't shouted, they're whispered. Soft, trembling confessions made in shadows, behind closed doors, meant for no one else to hear. And yet somehow, fate made sure I did. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Nathan had just left for a short medical conference 2 towns over, and the house had settled into its normal hush. I was in the pantry, organizing the shelves, when I heard footsteps in the hallway, Rachel's boots, then Eliza's lighter tread right behind. I held my breath. They stopped at the guest bedroom, the one next to the pantry. I froze, crouched beside the oatmeal jars. The door creaked shut, then, silence. A minute passed. Then 2. Then I heard Rachel's voice, hushed and hurried. You shouldn't have looked at me like that at dinner. Eliza's answer came barely above a whisper. I couldn't help it. You're the one who touched my hand under the table. I missed you, Rachel said. That's all. Then I heard the faint sound of a bed creak. A shuffle of movement. And the kind of stillness that speaks more than words. I felt a flush creep up my neck, not just from what I was hearing but from the sorrow settling deep into my stomach. My daughter. My daughter-in-law. A secret. A rhythm between them. I didn't need to hear more. I backed out of the pantry and walked into the backyard, the wind cutting cold against my skin. I didn't cry. Not then. I couldn't. My tears had dried into something harder. Determination. My family was rotting from the inside, and no one saw it but me. Later that evening, they emerged from the room one after the other like nothing had happened. Eliza tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Rachel hummed as she started the dishwasher. I watched them closely. I even served them tea. When Eliza leaned over to hand Rachel a spoon, their fingers brushed, and for a second too long, they lingered. That was the moment I knew they weren't just pretending to hide anymore. They were getting careless. Love makes you reckless, doesn't it? You forget to tuck the loose threads, to fix the buttons, to mask the size. And me? I was no longer just a passive observer. I was planning. Slowly. Carefully. Like a woman building a fire out of wet wood. I would gather proof. Evidence. And when the time came, I'd light the match. Not to ruin them, no. I wanted to reveal them. Because if they could lie so easily in front of me, what else were they hiding? What promises had they made behind Nathan's back? What if he found out the wrong way? What if this ended not in heartbreak, but in disaster? That night, I stayed up until everyone went to sleep. I tiptoed to the guest bedroom and opened the door. The bed was still warm. A scarf with Eliza's perfume lay tucked under the pillow. And on the nightstand was a pressed daisy, dried and delicate, the kind you press between books to remember something fleeting. I picked it up gently and held it in my hand, crushed by the beauty of what had been stolen from me. Not just honesty. Not just my son's peace. But the belief that love, in our family, had ever been simple. It wasn't anymore. It was tangled, secretive, and dangerously close to unraveling. And I was going to be the one holding the final thread. It was the smell of smoke that led me to it, sweet and sharp, like someone burning something they didn't want found. I had just come in from feeding the hens when I caught it. A curl of ash floated lazily from the living room hearth. The fire hadn't been lit all morning. And yet, there it was. Still warm. Still flickering. I crept forward and saw Rachel kneeling by the fireplace, her hands trembling as she shoved a folded letter between two logs. I ducked back into the hallway before she saw me, holding my breath. When I returned a minute later, she was gone, just the low flame and a few charred corners remained. But she hadn't been thorough. One sliver of paper had fluttered away from the flame and landed on the stone hearth. It was blackened at the edges, but the ink was still clear. You felt when I touched you under the orchard tree. I still dream about that day. I wish it could have been me beside you forever. No signature. No date. Just a confession someone hoped would never be read again. But I had read it. And I knew who had written it. The orchard tree was in the back field, behind the barn, Eliza's favorite reading spot as a teenager. She used to disappear there for hours, nestled between the branches like a fox in hiding. And now it was the setting of something else. Something forbidden. I kept the fragment in my pocket all day, rubbing it like a rosary stone. My mind raced with possibilities. Were they planning to run away together? Were they scared? Or worse, did they think this would stay hidden forever? That night, I called Nathan. I needed to hear his voice. Not to tell him anything, not yet, but to remember the sound of my son as he was, kind, hopeful, good. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Mom," he said. "You okay?" "Just checking in," I said softly. "How's the hotel?" "Boring. Clinical. But fine." "Rachel and Eliza holding down the fort?" I paused. "Yes, they're here. Glad they're getting along these days." "Eliza's laughing again, have you noticed?" I bit the inside of my cheek. "I've noticed. She used to be so distant, but Rachel's brought her out of her shell. Maybe she's what Eliza needed." My throat tightened. If only he knew. He was so proud. So happy that his wife and sister were close. So blind to the truth. I couldn't tell him. Not yet. Not when the web was still being spun. Because what if he didn't believe me? What if I didn't have enough? A torn letter and some longing glances wouldn't shatter the illusion. I needed a crack wide enough to break the entire mirror. So I waited. And in waiting, I watched. Over the next week, I noticed more, little things no one else would clock. Rachel wore the same sweater 3 times. Eliza wore it once too. They left the kitchen together more than once mid-conversation, whispering as they went. Rachel began humming again, low, soft songs Eliza used to play in high school. And in Eliza's room, I found a pressed lavender bloom, Rachel's favorite scent. They weren't hiding it well anymore. Because love, when denied for too long, becomes reckless when it thinks it's finally safe. But I was still here. Watching. Listening. And planning. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to wait until I had the full truth, in the open, undeniable, irreversible. And then, when the time was right, I would let the house fall. Let them all hear the echo of what they'd built. Because you can only lie for so long before someone lights a match in the dark. There's a certain kind of laughter that doesn't belong in the dark. The kind that sounds like silk being torn, a sound too soft to be innocent, too intimate to ignore. I heard it that Thursday night, long after I'd gone to bed. Or rather, after they thought I had. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that's never natural in an old home. It was the silence of people holding their breath. I crept out of my room barefoot, careful not to let the boards groan beneath me. The light under the living room door was faint, golden, flickering. Firelight. They were in there. Rachel and Eliza. I crouched by the hall corner, heart thudding like thunder in a mason jar. And then I heard it. Eliza's laughter. Soft. Secret. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard from her since before her college heartbreak, the one she swore never to speak of again. Only this time, it wasn't coming from a memory. It was Rachel's name she whispered next, followed by a breathless pause. "Don't," she said. "We can't keep doing this." But her voice was smiling. Rachel responded with something I couldn't make out. Then Eliza again, breathy and low. "If he finds out," the rest was muffled, but I didn't need the words. The tone was enough. Every mother knows her child's voice, the way it breaks under guilt, the way it trembles with longing. I felt my throat close. I had always prayed Eliza would find love again. But not like this. Not hidden beneath the marriage bed of her own brother. Not laced with deception and stolen glances. And Rachel, how could she be so cruel? So tender with my son in the daylight, only to become someone else entirely after dusk? The next morning, they were both in the kitchen. Rachel was pouring coffee, Eliza leaning against the counter. Their conversation was casual. Distant. Like nothing had happened. But Rachel's lipstick had smudged slightly below her bottom lip, and Eliza's shirt, one of Nathan's old ones, was wrinkled at the hem, tucked in a rush. They were getting careless again. Or maybe, they didn't care anymore. "Did you sleep well?" I asked as I walked in. Rachel smiled. "Like a baby." Eliza gave me a look I couldn't place. Guilt, maybe. Or pity. "I had weird dreams," she muttered. "It was the storm," I lied. "Restless winds do strange things to the soul." Neither of them responded. That day, I began writing everything down. A journal. Timestamps. Phrases. Glances. The softness in Eliza's voice when she said Rachel's name. The way Rachel always moved just a little too close when she thought no one saw. I wasn't doing it for drama. I was building a record, because the moment I finally confronted them, I wouldn't waver. I wouldn't give them the chance to twist my words. Or deny what I knew. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have known, was how close they were to tearing the veil off themselves. Because even secrets, when held too long, start to ache for air. And this one? This one was begging to be exposed. It was always the small things that told the biggest truths. Not the fiery arguments or dramatic scenes, but the forgotten hair tie on a doorknob, the sudden silence when someone walks into a room, the look that lingers a little too long. That morning, it was a necklace. A simple gold chain with a tiny opal charm, nothing extravagant, but unmistakably personal. I had given it to Eliza when she turned 25. It had belonged to my own mother before that. Eliza wore it only on rare occasions, saying it felt too meaningful for everyday use. And yet, when Rachel walked into the kitchen that morning, her hair pulled back, wearing a thick sweater and no makeup, that very same necklace shimmered around her neck. I stared at it like it was a weapon. "That's a lovely piece," I said, forcing my tone flat. "Where'd you find it?" Rachel blinked like she hadn't even realized it was there. Her hand went to her collarbone. "Oh, Eliza gave it to me. Said it didn't suit her anymore." I felt the air leave my lungs. Eliza would never have given that necklace away. Not unless it meant something. Not unless it had already been shared in the kind of moment you never talk about later. I smiled and nodded, but inside, something cracked further. Not just at the lie, but at how comfortable Rachel had become in wearing Eliza's things. Her jewelry. Her perfume. Her love. It was as if she was stepping into Eliza's skin slowly, piece by piece. Later that day, when Rachel left for the co-op, I knocked on Eliza's door. She looked surprised to see me. Her room smelled faintly of lavender and something warm, like comfort wrapped in guilt. "Can we talk?" I asked. She hesitated, then stepped aside. I sat on her bed while she hovered near the window, arms crossed. "I saw Rachel wearing your opal necklace." "She liked it," Eliza replied too quickly. "I thought she should have it." "You never even wore it." Her shoulders tensed. "It's just a necklace, Mom." I studied her face, the way she avoided my eyes, how her fingers trembled slightly at her sleeves. "You know," I said softly, "when you were 10, you cried for an hour when you thought you lost that necklace at summer camp. You called it your moonstone. Remember?" Eliza turned her face away. "Things change." "Not that much," I whispered. "Not between mothers and daughters." A long silence settled between us. I didn't push further. I stood and walked to the door. But before I left, I added, "Some things don't need to be said out loud, Eliza. But silence can hurt more than the truth." That night, I found the necklace placed on the bathroom counter. No note. No explanation. Just the chain coiled like a snake, waiting to be noticed. She was sending a message. I just wasn't sure what it meant yet. Remorse? Surrender? Or defiance? Either way, it was no longer in Rachel's hands. And I was no longer playing the passive mother. I was a witness to something dangerous, something close to breaking open. And when it did, I had to be the one in control of where the pieces fell. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. Even the usual creaks in the hallway seemed to pause, as if the walls themselves were waiting for what came next. It had been 2 days since the necklace incident, and Rachel had returned to wearing her own jewelry, but the damage had already been done. Eliza barely spoke unless spoken to. Rachel smiled more than usual, which meant she was trying too hard. And I was watching every move like a hawk circling prey it once protected. But what I wasn't prepared for was the phone call. Or rather, the one that almost wasn't answered. I had been cleaning the porch cushions when I heard the faint vibration on the kitchen table. I walked in and saw Nathan's name flashing on Rachel's phone. She was out front watering the garden. I froze. It rang again. And then again. 5 full calls in a row. That wasn't normal. I picked up on the 6th. "Hello?" There was silence. Then Nathan's voice, low and hurried. "Rachel? Hey, I just need to ask, is Eliza okay?" I blinked. "Nathan, it's me. Mom." "Oh, Mom. Sorry. I've been calling Rachel. Eliza hasn't returned any of my texts all week. I sent her something important, and it bounced back." I tried to keep my tone even. "She's fine. Just distracted, I suppose." "Are you sure?" he asked. "She seemed off last time we spoke. And Rachel said she'd talk to her for me." "Did she?" I paused. "I'm sure they've spoken." "Has Eliza mentioned anything odd?" His voice dipped. You'll think I'm paranoid, but there was a night, before I left, where I walked into the kitchen and I thought I saw something between them. My blood ran cold. What did you see? He hesitated. Rachel brushed her hand over Eliza's back. It wasn't much, just a second. But the way Eliza froze. I don't know. I felt something was off. I closed my eyes. Nathan, I said gently, you're not crazy. He exhaled. So you've noticed too. Let's not jump to conclusions, I whispered, even as my stomach twisted. Just focus on your conference. Let me handle things here. He didn't argue. Just said, okay, and hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand, the weight of his trust pressing down on me like stone. He knew. At least part of him did. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to feel the shift, the crack forming in the foundation. And that terrified me. Because a broken heart is dangerous. But a broken heart that never saw it coming? That's a storm you can't predict. Rachel came in moments later, cheeks flushed from the sun. Was that my phone ringing? I handed it to her calmly. Nathan. He says hi. She smiled, but I saw the panic behind it. Everything okay? You tell me, I said, walking past her. In the hallway, Eliza stood frozen. She had been listening. Her lips were parted slightly, her expression unreadable. You talked to him? She asked quietly. I nodded. He's worried about you. What did you say? That you're distracted. That's one word for it, she muttered, almost to herself. And then she turned and walked away. No excuses. No defense. Just distance. The walls of this house were beginning to bend under the weight of unspoken things. And I was standing dead center, holding a secret that wasn't mine, watching it grow teeth. Nathan was coming home in 2 days. And when he walked through that door, the world he thought he knew would be waiting with its claws out. I just didn't know who would bleed first. The day Nathan came home, the clouds hung low over the hills like a warning. The sky was the color of rusted silver, and even the wind had a nervous edge to it. I baked a peach pie, mostly to keep my hands busy. Rachel offered to help, but I declined. Eliza stayed upstairs most of the day, claiming a headache. No one looked each other in the eyes. We were 4 people living in a house of glass, and the first stone was about to be thrown. I watched from the window as Nathan's car pulled into the driveway. His tall frame stepped out, wearing the same blue windbreaker I bought him last Christmas. He looked tired. But more than that, he looked unsure. Rachel darted outside, smile plastered across her face, arms wide open. He hugged her, but it was brief. Polite. Not the kissy reunion she was hoping for. Eliza peeked through the stairway just long enough to see them, then disappeared back into her room. I set the table slowly, every plate clinked like a drumbeat in my ears. When they walked in, Rachel clung to Nathan's arm, but he gently shrugged her off to remove his coat. Where's Eliza? He asked. Upstairs, I replied. Said she had a headache. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on the staircase. Dinner was stiff. Rachel talked too much. Nathan said very little. I watched him watching her, how his eyes flitted to her hands, her necklace, the way she avoided Eliza's name entirely. He knew. Not everything. But enough to start seeing. And Eliza? She never came down. I knocked on her door later with a tray of food. She didn't open it, but her voice came through, low and hollow. Leave it by the door, please. I did. And as I turned to go, I heard her whisper something to herself. Just one word. Stupid. That night, I sat on the porch while Nathan joined me with a blanket and 2 mugs of tea. Mom, he said quietly. Something's wrong. I didn't pretend otherwise. I just looked at him and said, I know. Rachel's changed, he murmured. And Eliza's, distant. But when I walked past the guest room yesterday, I smelled her perfume. Rachel's. On Eliza's pillow. My chest tightened. I don't know what to think, he admitted. Part of me feels like I'm losing my mind. You're not, I said softly. He looked at me, eyes wide. Then tell me I'm wrong. Please. Tell me there's nothing between them. I looked away. The moon was full that night, white and watchful. Some things, I whispered, we don't get to unsee, Nathan. Or undo. He set his mug down. What does that mean? I turned back to him, tears burning behind my eyes. It means you deserve the truth. But not like this. Not in pieces. Then give me the whole thing, he demanded. But I shook my head. No. You need to see it for yourself. And soon, you will. He didn't press me further. He just stood up and walked back inside, his shoulders heavier than when he arrived. And I knew, deep down, that the cracks in this family were no longer just beneath the surface. They were splitting wide open. By morning, someone would either speak or shatter. The next morning, the house felt like a minefield. Every movement was cautious, every door creaked sharp as a blade. Nathan stayed quiet during breakfast, poking at his scrambled eggs with the distracted look of a man trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. Rachel tried to act normal, but her usual warmth was a little too practiced, her laughter just half a second too late. Eliza didn't show up at all. She remained locked in her room, and for once, no one asked why. Until Nathan did. "Where's Eliza?" he asked flatly, not even bothering to look at Rachel when he said it. "She's not feeling well," Rachel said, buttering her toast too forcefully. "Again?" His voice was sharp now. Rachel's knife paused mid-spread. "She hasn't been herself lately." Nathan nodded slowly, then dropped his fork. "You've been spending a lot of time with her, haven't you?" The air snapped. Rachel froze. "She needed someone," she said carefully. "After everything she's been through. You know how isolated she gets. And you were what, her emotional support?" Nathan's tone was dangerously calm. "Don't do this," Rachel whispered. "Don't what?" "Ask questions about why my wife and my sister disappear together for hours? Why you suddenly wear the perfume she wore in college? Why her necklace was on your neck?" Rachel stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loud against the tile. "You're twisting everything." "Am I?" he asked, rising too now. "Then tell me straight, Rachel. Are you in love with her?" I was standing by the doorway, heart pounding in my chest. I expected denial. A tearful gasp. A deflection. But what I didn't expect, what none of us did, was the silence. Rachel didn't answer. Not with words. Her lips parted, then closed. Her chin trembled. But she didn't say no. And that silence was louder than any confession. Nathan's face crumpled. "God," he whispered, stumbling back a step like he'd been punched. "So it's true." Eliza appeared in the hallway behind him, pale as paper. "Nathan," he spun around to her, pain searing through his eyes. "When did it start?" "Please don't do this here," Eliza whispered. "When did it start?" he repeated. Her voice was barely audible. "Before the wedding." Rachel shut her eyes, like she was bracing for the impact. Nathan stepped back again, his jaw clenched, his breath ragged. "You both lied to me. 4 years." "We didn't mean to," Rachel said. You didn't mean to?" His voice broke. "You married me, Rachel. You stood in front of my mother, my friends, my family, and made vows you never intended to keep." "I thought it would go away," Rachel said desperately. "But it didn't." "You thought what would go away?" he snapped. "The way you look at my sister like she hung the damn moon?" No one moved. The house was dead still. And then Nathan turned and stormed out the front door, slamming it behind him with a force that shook the windows. Rachel dropped to the chair, head in her hands. Eliza backed against the wall like a child caught in a nightmare. I stepped forward slowly. Now, I said, voice quiet, you'll both face what you created. Neither of them replied. Because in that moment, the fantasy had ended. The affair wasn't a secret anymore. It was real. Named. Alive. And every step forward from here would be on shattered ground. Nathan didn't come home that night. Or the next. He didn't call. Didn't text. His car was gone from the driveway, and his silence stretched across the house like a thick fog. I left him messages, just one a day. Nothing desperate, nothing pleading. Just a mother's voice saying, I'm here when you're ready. But I knew. I knew this wasn't just heartbreak. This was devastation. He hadn't just lost a wife, he had lost the sister he adored, the family he believed in. And maybe worst of all, he'd lost the belief that he could ever trust his heart again. Meanwhile, the house collapsed inward. Rachel moved through the rooms like a ghost. She stopped wearing makeup. She didn't cook. She didn't even look me in the eyes anymore. Eliza barely left her bedroom. I'd hear her crying sometimes, late at night, muffled into her pillow. And for once, I didn't feel like comforting her. I felt like shaking her, screaming, what did you think would happen? But I didn't. I let the silence do its work. I let guilt have its weight. One morning, 3 days after Nathan's departure, I found Rachel on the back porch. She was sitting in her robe, clutching a mug of tea she hadn't touched. Her hair was wild. Her eyes red. He's not coming back, is he? She asked, her voice dry as dust. I didn't answer. I ruined everything, she whispered. I loved him, in my own way, but Eliza, don't, I interrupted gently. Don't try to explain something you've already destroyed. She looked at me then. Truly looked. You must hate me. I don't, I said. But I don't pity you either. What you feel for Eliza, maybe it was real. But real love doesn't come wrapped in lies. She looked away. I thought I could live both lives. I really did. And now you have neither, I said. She flinched, but said nothing more. Inside, I found Eliza curled up on the couch, her face pale and expressionless. Nathan left his wedding band on the mantel, I said, placing it gently beside her. If you have any dignity left, you'll return it. Her fingers trembled as she reached for it. I never meant to hurt him, she whispered. But you did. I didn't want this to happen. I sat beside her and said nothing for a moment. You were supposed to be his anchor, Eliza. His one constant. You two had each other when your father died. He trusted you. Her voice cracked. I know. So tell me, I said, was it worth it? She looked at me then. And for a flicker of a second, her eyes lit with something dangerous. Yes, she said softly. It was. The admission didn't shock me as much as I thought it would. Because love, the kind that steals breath and ruins lives, is rarely rational. And sometimes, people chase it knowing it'll burn. But even so, I stood. Then you can sit in the fire you lit, I said. But don't expect me to fan the flames or fetch water. That night, I locked my door for the first time in 30 years. Because for the first time, I no longer recognized the people sleeping under my roof. Not as children. Not as family. Just strangers with matching blood, tied together by secrets and betrayal. And somewhere out there, my son was nursing wounds I couldn't even touch. But he would return. One day. And when he did, I'd be ready, with the full truth laid bare. It had hung in the hallway for over 6 years. The framed photo from Nathan and Rachel's wedding day, our whole family gathered beneath the church's wide archway. Nathan and Rachel in the center, radiant in their youth, his arms wrapped proudly around her waist. Eliza off to the side in a pale lavender dress, her smile a touch too wide, her eyes distant. I'd walked past that photo 1,000 times and never noticed the shadow in her eyes. But now? Now it screamed at me. I stood there for a long while that morning, staring at it, remembering how I used to love that day. How proud I'd been of both my children. How relieved I was to see them happy after their father passed. And now, all of it felt like a cruel joke. I took the photo down. Not in anger, but in mourning. I wrapped it gently in a towel and placed it in the attic. Some things were too broken to leave on display. As I climbed down the stairs, I saw Rachel standing by the window, arms crossed tightly across her chest. She turned to me slowly. "Are you going to throw us all away now?" she asked. I didn't answer. "Do I even get to say goodbye to him?" she continued. "Or do I just disappear like a mistake no one talks about?" "You made your choice," I said. "You had years to choose differently." She looked like she wanted to argue. But she didn't. She just walked away, slow and quiet. That afternoon, I sat in the garden and opened the journal I'd been keeping, the one filled with my observations, the timelines, the camera recordings, the overheard whispers. I flipped to the final page and wrote one sentence: "It's no longer a secret. It's a scar." Eliza came out later, barefoot, holding a small plate of sliced apples. She sat beside me and placed it between us. "I know you hate me," she said. "I don't hate you," I replied. "But I hate what you did." "I do too," she said, almost in a whisper. "Then why don't you stop?" Her lips parted. "Because she's the only person who makes me feel alive." I closed my eyes. "And what about your brother?" "He'll never forgive me." "Should he?" She said nothing. Just plucked a slice of apple from the plate and took a bite. We sat in silence as the wind moved through the trees and the garden leaves rustled like they were keeping secrets of their own. Later that evening, I heard the front door open. My breath caught. But it wasn't Nathan. It was the mailman, dropping off a thick, padded envelope addressed to me. No return name. Just a P.O. box in another state. Inside was a letter from Nathan. A real one. Handwritten. He had mailed it before he left, and it had taken days to arrive. I unfolded it with shaking hands. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't say everything face to face. I don't know how to process what I saw, or what I felt. But I need time. I need space. I know you see more than you ever let on, and I trust you to hold this family together, if that's even possible. I don't know if I'll come back soon. Or at all. But if I do, it'll be for you. Not them. Love." Nathan tears rolled down my cheeks. Not because he was gone, but because his love for me had survived the wreckage. And that meant I had one job left, to make sure, if he ever did return, he came home to a truth that wasn't rotten, but real. Even if that meant tearing the rest down first. It was well past midnight when I noticed the envelope. Plain white, tucked neatly on the corner of my bed. My name written across the front in Eliza's familiar slanted handwriting. I stared at it for a while, hesitant to touch it, like it might burn my fingers. But eventually, I sat down and peeled it open. Inside was a letter, 5 pages long. Her truth. Her confession. Every word inked with pain and longing, scribbled out in places and rewritten as though she'd bled through the pen. "Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't forgive me, if I were you. But I need you to understand. I didn't plan this. I didn't chase it. It just happened. And once it did, I couldn't escape it. Rachel and we were close even before the wedding. But I told her to marry Nathan. I told her it would be the right thing. I wanted her to have the life she deserved, and I thought maybe I could forget. But I couldn't. She couldn't either. Every look we exchanged, every moment we were alone, it brought everything back. It wasn't just attraction, Mom. I wish it were. I wish I could say it was a stupid mistake. But it wasn't. It was love. Real, frightening, all-consuming love. And I know that makes it worse. Because that means we chose to keep lying. I broke my brother's heart. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed everything Dad ever taught us. But please don't think I did it lightly. I've paid for it every day since. I don't know what to do now. I don't know who I am, or if I even deserve to stay in this family. But I needed you to hear it from me. Not a camera. Not a fight. Just this. The truth. Love, Eliza. I read it twice. Then 3 times. The words blurred, but I kept reading, as if some part of me believed that if I understood her better, I'd hurt less. But it didn't lessen the pain. It deepened it. Because now I saw it for what it was, a love that had been buried and bloomed in all the wrong soil. I folded the letter and held it against my chest. Not because I forgave her. Not yet. But because no mother ever wants to see her child this lost. The next morning, Eliza was gone. Her room empty. Her suitcase missing. I found Rachel sitting on the bottom step of the porch, knees pulled to her chest, staring out at the gray horizon. She left, she said without turning. Did she say where? No. Just said she needed space. Did she leave you anything? Rachel pulled a chain from her pocket. The opal necklace. Eliza had given it back, again. But this time, it wasn't returned to Rachel's hand. It was left on the windowsill of her room, with a note beside it that read, "I can't wear this while pretending to be someone I'm not." Rachel's lips were trembling. I never thought she'd actually go. And yet she did, I said. Just like Nathan. She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. Am I the only one still here? You're here, I said. But that doesn't mean you belong anymore. She flinched at the words, and I almost regretted them. But the truth needed its voice, too. That afternoon, I made calls. I put the house on temporary lockdown. Told the family that we were going through something personal. No visitors. No gossip. No lies. And then I sat in the garden, alone, for a very long time, listening to the wind rustle through the apple trees. 2 of my children had fled from the wreckage. One remained, sitting silently in a house that no longer welcomed her. I didn't know what came next. Only that something had broken so completely, we'd never return to who we were. But maybe, just maybe, we could still become something honest. I didn't expect to find anything when I cleaned Eliza's room. I wasn't looking for more heartbreak. I just wanted to reclaim the space, to air it out, to chase away the thick cloud of pain and longing that still clung to the curtains and clutched at the bed frame. But as I pulled the dresser from the corner, the floorboard creaked differently beneath my foot. A hollow sound. I dropped to my knees and pressed down. It gave slightly, revealing the edge of a loose plank. My hands trembled as I pried it up. Inside the narrow cavity was a small cedar box. Smooth. Untouched by dust. Locked with a simple clasp. I opened it. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Folded with care, tied with a faded ribbon. And beneath those, photographs. Not of Rachel and Eliza together, but of Rachel alone, laughing in the garden, holding a glass of wine on the porch, gazing out at the sunset from the kitchen window. All taken when no one was watching. Except Eliza. There was one picture I couldn't stop staring at. Rachel asleep on the couch, a book open on her chest, her hair tangled over the cushion. The image was so tender, it hurt. This wasn't lust. This wasn't manipulation. This had been love. Love hidden like a sin. I looked through the letters. They weren't all dated, but the earliest one was from before the wedding. Eliza had written, "I will never forgive myself for what I'm about to do. But I'm doing it for you. So you can live the life they expect. So we can keep breathing, even if it's apart." The wedding had been built on that lie. And now that I had these, I had more than Rachel and Eliza's word. I had proof. Not just of what they did, but why. That night, I confronted Rachel. She was sitting alone in the kitchen, nursing a cold cup of tea like it was her last possession on earth. I set the box on the table. Eliza left this behind, I said. Her eyes widened as she opened it. Her hands flew to her mouth when she saw the pictures. The letters. The tiny pressed flower between two envelopes. I didn't know she kept any of this, Rachel whispered. She never showed me. She didn't need to, I said. She wrote it all down so she wouldn't forget what she was sacrificing. Rachel's shoulders slumped. She told me once that loving me felt like drowning. That every time she tried to swim toward me, the waves pulled her under. I sat across from her, the distance between us thicker than blood. So why didn't you let her go? Because I didn't want to lose her, Rachel said. Even if it meant lying to the man who gave me everything. You could have walked away before it began, I said. You could have spared him this. Her voice cracked. I know. So what now? I asked. Are you just going to sit here until Nathan comes back and finds you still in his house? Rachel looked up at me, her eyes hollow. You want me gone? No, I said calmly. I want you to decide whether you deserve to stay. She didn't respond. I left the box with her and walked out into the garden. The trees whispered with summer wind, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was tired. So tired. But I still had strength left for one thing, making sure the end of this story was mine to write, not theirs. Eliza was gone. Nathan was silent. Rachel was crumbling. And I was the only one standing on solid ground. For now. I always believed that a garden reflects the soul of the woman tending it. Mine had once been a place of refuge, roses curling gently toward the sun, tulips nodding in spring breezes, lavender bushes humming with bees. But that summer, nothing bloomed. The roses browned at the edges. The herbs wilted no matter how tenderly I watered them. Even the soil smelled tired. Rachel stood in the garden that morning, her hair pulled back in a hasty bun, still holding the cedar box from Eliza's room in her arms like a child gripping a stuffed bear. She looked out at the dying lavender, then at me. She's not coming back, is she? She asked softly. Not unless she chooses to face what she left behind. Rachel set the box on the garden bench. I thought if I stayed here long enough, if I was honest, maybe I could fix some part of it. But you were right. This house doesn't want me anymore. I nodded once. It's not about the house, Rachel. It's about the people you wounded inside it. She wiped under her eyes with the back of her hand. I loved her. I know, I said. But you didn't love her cleanly. You loved her like a thief loves the dark. Her knees buckled slightly, and she sat on the bench. Do you think Nathan will ever forgive me? I think Nathan will survive you, I said, but I don't know if he'll ever look at you and not remember the lie. She looked down at her hands. Do I wait for him? Or do I leave now? That's up to you, I replied. But if you stay as a guest. Not as a wife. Not as a daughter. Not anymore. She looked up at me then, and her face had lost all its stubbornness, all its youth. For the first time I saw her for what she truly was, a woman grieving a love that was never allowed to live in the light. She nodded. I'll pack tonight. I left her there with the box, surrounded by silent plants and sun-bleached petals. The garden no longer spoke. The bees were gone. Even the wind had gone still. That night, Rachel cleaned her things quietly. I didn't offer to help. I didn't stop her. And when she paused at the front door with her suitcase in one hand and the cedar box in the other, she looked back once. Thank you, she said. For not hating me. I never said I didn't, I replied. But even hate is a form of love. A twisted cousin of it. She gave a faint, exhausted smile and left. The door clicked shut like a sigh. And for the first time in weeks, the house exhaled. Empty now. Quiet. But finally honest. I walked through the rooms with my fingertips grazing the walls, reminding myself that this house had seen everything. Joy. Grief. marriage, betrayal. And now, silence. I stopped at the mantel, stared at the empty space where the wedding photo used to be, and whispered aloud, "You'll come back, Nathan. I know you will. Because sons don't stay gone forever. Not from mothers who wait with the truth." And now, for the first time in a long time, I was ready to tell it all. It was dusk when I heard it. The slow, cautious creak of a shoe on the old wooden step, the same groan the porch made when Nathan would sneak out as a teenager to meet his friends, the same sound that once meant nothing but now sent my heart galloping. I stood at the kitchen sink, still holding the rinsed teacup, frozen in place. The front door didn't knock. It opened, gently. I turned around. And there he was. Nathan. Standing in the doorway, unshaven, thinner, his shoulders heavier than I'd ever seen them. His eyes met mine, and in that instant, no words passed, but everything was spoken. I rushed to him before he could speak. Wrapped my arms around his middle and held on like I was drowning. He didn't pull away. He didn't cry. He just stood there, breathing in the smell of the home he once trusted. "I wasn't sure I'd come back," he said softly. I whispered. We sat at the kitchen table, the one where it all unraveled. The chair across from him sat empty. Eliza's. Rachel's. A ghost now. I poured him tea, not asking questions yet. He sipped it slowly, both hands around the mug. "I went to stay with a friend," he said. "Didn't tell anyone. I needed space. Time." "Of course," I said. "I kept the room just the way it was." He glanced around. "Where's Rachel?" "Gone," I replied. "She left 2 nights ago. Packed quietly. Took nothing she didn't come with." He nodded slowly. "And Eliza?" "Left before her. She didn't say where she was going. She only said she couldn't breathe here anymore." He looked down at the mug. "Good." The word didn't sound vengeful. It sounded broken. "Nathan," I began gently, "you can ask me anything. Or nothing. I'll answer what you want and stay silent if you don't." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "When did you know?" "Truly?" "The day I found the note in the recipe book." He nodded. "So you knew before I did?" "I did," I said, "but I needed you to see it for yourself. Otherwise, it would have just sounded like jealousy. Or madness." He leaned back in the chair. "I hate them for what they did. But what I hate most is that I still feel something when I think about her. That's what kills me. Love doesn't vanish just because the person behind it lied," I said softly. "It's a root. Even after the tree falls, it stays in the ground." "And Eliza?" he asked, voice lower now. "What am I supposed to do with that?" "You forgive her," I said. "Not for her sake. But for your own. You were the best brother. And the best son. She didn't betray you because you failed her, she betrayed you because she failed herself." His lip quivered for just a second. And then he looked away. "I don't know if I can ever trust anyone again." "Then start small," I said. "Trust me. I'll walk this part with you." He looked at me and nodded slowly. "Okay." We sat in silence again, but this time, it wasn't empty. It was healing. That night, I made his favorite soup. He didn't eat much, but he sat with me until the candles burned low. And when he stood to go upstairs, he paused on the stairs. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "I still wish none of this had happened." I stood and met his eyes. "I know. But sometimes the truth burns everything down so you can see what was real underneath." He went to bed quietly. And I sat alone in the kitchen with the ghosts of my family, one by one beginning to leave me. But Nathan had come back. And for the first time in months, I slept through the night. It was 2 weeks after Nathan returned when the phone rang late one evening. The landline, rarely used anymore, buzzed in the quiet of the kitchen while Nathan and I sat sipping our tea. We both froze. It was nearly 10 p.m. I reached for the receiver, something in my chest already aching. "Hello?" "Mom," the voice was soft. Fragile. I hadn't heard it in so long, but I knew it instantly. "Eliza." Nathan looked up sharply. I stood and walked to the back door, stepping out onto the porch as the wind curled around me. "Where are you?" "Not far," she said. "I'd been staying with a friend near the lake. I didn't know if I should call." "Why now?" I asked. "Because I miss you. And because I heard Rachel left. I thought maybe things had settled." I didn't answer right away. I heard her breath on the other end, waiting. "Nathan's home," I said. "He's sitting right beside me." Silence. Then a soft, "Does he hate me?" "He hurts," I said honestly. "But hate? I don't know if Nathan has that in him." "Can I come by?" she asked. "Just to talk?" I paused, closing my eyes. "If you do, come with the truth. No more rehearsed lines. No excuses. Just you, Eliza, as I remember you before all this." "Okay," she whispered. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow." I hung up and turned to find Nathan standing behind me. "That was her," he said. I nodded. "She wants to see us." He looked away, jaw tight. "I don't know if I can look at her without breaking." "Then don't look with your pain," I said. "Look with your history. She's your sister." "She was my best friend," he whispered. "Until she wasn't." He walked away before I could respond. That night, I barely slept. The wind knocked at the windows like it wanted to be let in, and my dreams were filled with echoes of the past: birthday parties, late-night talks between siblings, Eliza's laughter ringing through the garden. By morning, I was up early. I cleaned the house like I used to when guests were coming, not because I wanted to impress, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Nathan didn't speak over breakfast. He just sat quietly, stirring his coffee, staring into the dark swirl. Then, at exactly 10:02 a.m., I saw the car pull into the drive. A modest sedan. No Rachel in the passenger seat. Just Eliza. She stepped out slowly, wearing an old sweater I hadn't seen in years. Her face was thinner, her eyes tired. But there was something else there too: resolve. I opened the door before she knocked. For a moment, she just looked at me. Then I reached forward and pulled her into my arms. She clung to me like a child, sobbing silently into my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I nodded against her hair. "You have a long road ahead of you, Eliza. But you came home. That counts for something." She pulled back and looked inside. "Is he here?" "He is." She stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning every corner like she was afraid to touch anything. And then Nathan stepped into the hallway. They both froze. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Eliza opened her mouth. "I don't expect forgiveness." Nathan swallowed hard. "Good," he said. "Because I'm not sure I have it to give." She nodded slowly. "But I needed you to know, it was real. What I felt. I didn't fake it. I didn't set out to betray you." "But you did," Nathan said. "You chose her. And you let me marry her while you stood there knowing everything." "I did," Eliza whispered, tears falling freely now. "And I've hated myself for it every day since." Nathan's voice broke. "You broke something in me." She stepped forward but stopped herself, keeping distance. "I know. I don't know if I can ever see you the same," he said. "But I still wanted you to come home." Her eyes widened in shock. What?" "Because no matter how broken we are, we're still family," Nathan said. "And maybe the only way I can start healing is by facing you, not running from you." Eliza nodded, weeping openly now. Thank you. He didn't embrace her. Not yet. But he didn't leave either. He stood there, hurting and human. And somehow, that was enough. I turned away then, into the kitchen, so they could sit. Talk. Begin something that wasn't reconciliation yet, but the first spark of it. Because families don't heal in one day. They heal one truth at a time. It had been 3 hours since Eliza arrived, and for the first time in what felt like years, the three of us sat at the kitchen table together. The chairs didn't creak as loudly. The tension was still there, yes, but something had shifted. A gentler grief. A quieter wound. Eliza sat with her hands wrapped around a mug, steam curling past her tear-flushed cheeks. Nathan sat across from her, arms folded tight, his jaw still clenched, but he stayed. That, in itself, felt like a miracle. I didn't come to win you back, Eliza said quietly, eyes fixed on the rim of her mug. I didn't come to explain away what can't be explained. I just wanted to sit across from you and say I'm not hiding anymore. Nathan looked at her. Not through her. Not past her. At her. You're not the person I grew up with, he said. But I think you want to be again. I do, she whispered. It's going to take time, he said. Years, maybe. I'll wait. Don't wait, he said. Live. But live honestly. Her lips parted slightly, like those words were something she hadn't allowed herself to hear in months. I stepped in then, placing a warm pie dish in the center of the table. The same kind I used to make when they were kids and someone had a bad day. The smell of cinnamon and browned sugar filled the kitchen, and for a brief, fragile second, it almost felt like home again. Eat, I said gently. You don't have to forgive each other in a day, but you do have to eat. Eliza smiled faintly. Nathan let out a slow exhale. And we did. We ate in silence at first, but by the second slice, Eliza asked Nathan how the clinic was doing. He answered. Not warmly, but he didn't shut her down. I watched them begin to thread words across the shattered bridge between them. Careful. Delicate. But real. After the meal, Nathan rose and placed his dish in the sink. Eliza reached for it, instinctively, to wash it for him. He hesitated, then let her take it. That tiny surrender told me more than words ever could. He didn't trust her yet, but he didn't hate her either. Later, after Eliza went for a walk to clear her head, Nathan sat beside me on the porch, arms resting on his knees. She still loves her, he said. Yes, I replied. I could see it in everything she didn't say. Do you think Rachel loved her back? I think Rachel loved both of you, I said. But love doesn't excuse cruelty. No, he said. It doesn't. We sat there in the dusk, the sky melting into soft purples and fading oranges. I watched Nathan as he rubbed his thumb over his wedding ring finger, the skin still bearing the faint outline of what used to be there. She'll never be my sister the same way again, he said. But maybe, she can be someone new. I reached over and placed my hand on his. That's all any of us can hope for now. A door opened behind us. Eliza had returned. She didn't join us. Not yet. She just stood in the doorway, watching the horizon with us. The three of us. A family still fractured, but no longer lying. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't in months, hope. Not the naive kind. The hard-earned, quiet kind that rises after everything else has burned away. I was trimming the dead roses when Eliza stepped into the yard. She didn't speak at first, just knelt beside me, picking away dried leaves with her bare fingers. The soil was still tired, but the sun had warmed it. There was life underneath, waiting. Do you remember when we planted the lavender? She asked quietly. You were 12, I replied. You wanted your own little corner of peace. You called it your secret garden. She smiled faintly. I used to lie there for hours, dreaming about things I didn't have the courage to say. I know, I said. I think I always knew, Eliza. You knew about me and Rachel? Not at first. But I knew you were aching for something, and scared of who it might hurt. She wiped her hands on her jeans. I thought love was supposed to save us. It can, I said. But not when it's built on lies. That's not love's fault. That's ours. She nodded slowly. Nathan's different now. Softer, somehow. But also, distant. He's rebuilding, I said. You burned down his picture of the world. Now he has to draw a new one, and decide if you still belong in it. She looked up at me, eyes red but clear. Do you think I do? I reached out and touched her cheek. You're my daughter. You will always belong in my life. But I can't decide for Nathan. He's the one whose vows were broken. She bowed her head. I miss Rachel. I miss her every hour. I know. But I don't think I could go back, even if she begged me to. I paused, pruning the last brittle stem. Why not? Eliza looked toward the hills, eyes glassy. Because she made me choose between silence and shame. And I'm tired of choosing pain. That night, Nathan came home with groceries. Without a word, he handed Eliza her favorite tea. She blinked at him, surprised. You remembered. You always hated chamomile, he said. So I got the jasmine one instead. That was it. No apology. No embrace. Just an offering. A small bridge, built from a single kindness. I watched from the doorway, tears forming behind my smile. We didn't need a big reunion. We just needed truth. And small truths, stacked carefully, can hold up the heaviest of broken things. That night, I sat alone in the garden under the stars. I ran my fingers through the dirt, searching for something beneath the surface. A root. A shoot. A sign. And there it was, just the faintest bud from the lavender. Reaching, finally, toward the light. The first bloom of something honest. Before we begin, if this story has touched you in any way, please, subscribe my channel, like this story, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever forgiven someone who broke your heart but didn't know how to love you right? And, where are you from? I'd love to know who's listening. The porch had always been the place where truth landed in our family. My late husband used to sit here in the early mornings with his coffee and say nothing at all. Eliza learned to walk on this porch. Nathan kissed Rachel for the first time under its awning. And now, it was where we sat, together again, but changed. Nathan on one side, Eliza on the other. A quiet between them, not uncomfortable, but unfinished. She sent a letter, Eliza said, breaking the silence. Nathan turned toward her slowly. Rachel? Eliza nodded and handed him the envelope. It was unopened. I couldn't read it. I didn't want her to speak into this version of my life, the one I'm trying to rebuild without her. Nathan took the letter but didn't open it either. He turned it over once, then placed it on the table beside him. You don't have to be punished forever, he said. But I do, Eliza whispered. Not by you. By me. Don't, he replied gently. We both lost something. And I think we both deserve to find new things too. Her eyes welled up. You're not angry? Of course I'm angry, he said. But I'm not empty anymore. That's worse than anger. He looked at her. You broke my heart, Eliza. But you didn't destroy it. I stood and walked inside, giving them the space they didn't know they needed. From the window, I saw them keep talking, no shouting, no tears, just words being passed back and forth like heirlooms, fragile, irreplaceable, and finally safe to touch. I moved through the house slowly, placing the photo of the family, yes, even the wedding one, back on the mantel. Not because we were whole again, but because we had lived through the breaking and were still here. Later that evening, Nathan lit the fire pit in the yard. Eliza brought out hot cider. I sat between them, wrapped in a shawl, and we watched the flames dance into the dark. You know, I said, sipping slowly, this could have ended much worse. It almost did, Nathan said. But it didn't, Eliza added. Because you held us together, Mom. Even when we didn't deserve it. I smiled. Not with pride, but with relief. I didn't hold you, I said. I just didn't let go. There's a difference. And that was it. No grand forgiveness. No perfect ending. But healing, slow, imperfect, and real. The kind that hums under your skin and tells you, even in broken families, love can still grow. You just have to give it sunlight, truth, and time. Thank you for listening to this story. If you made it to the end, I hope it reminded you that even the most painful betrayals don't have to be the final chapter. Sometimes, they're the beginning of something new and honest. Please don't forget to subscribe my channel, leave a comment about your own story, and tell me where you're watching from. Until next time, take care of your heart and each other.